Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to VTP Stage 2 Online Technical Tuesday Coaching Call number 200 for the 14th of July 2026. I hope you've had a good week. I hope you have had some enjoyable trading sessions in what is once again another eventful week and an eventful month and an eventful quarter and an eventful year that is 2026. As the old Chinese saying goes, may you live in interesting times. And I think it's probably fair to say we have been. As you said, this is the 200th, of the Stage 2 Technical Tuesday Coaching Calls, hence why I have opened it up to live stream. If you're joining us there on YouTube live stream, it's great to have you here with us. It's really fascinating to have people here, and I hope that you're able to take a little bit of insight from this. This is the weekly call that we do every Tuesday, 12:30 rather, just looking at a little bit more of some of the technical details within FX indices and commodities markets. As always, you are very welcome here, but just remember that you're always responsible for your own trading decisions. And if you want a little bit of help in sustaining and improving your performance, there is the VTP Trader Accountability Group that is running this quarter, helping build discipline, accountability, and consistency in your trading. You can ping me if you've got questions, or that QR code will take you there, or there's a bit.ly code that will take you there that you can see there. Or as I said, you can ping me if you've got any questions. Okay, VTP Stage 2 is all about the big picture, all about building the big picture, all right? It is all about overlaying strategy onto the tactics and mechanics that we learn in Stage 1, all right? When it comes to strategy, it is desperately simple, okay? For FX indices and commodities markets, we are looking to buy strength and sell weakness. And where possible, we'll enact and execute that on a pullback in a trend using a price action trigger for an entry. People make the strategy far too complicated, all right? Your strategy is the overlying big picture of how you look to operate in markets, okay? And it should be able to be explained in one or two lines, because if you can explain it in one or two lines, you probably understand it. If you understand it, then you can execute it, okay? People get caught up, and I have to say, men in particular, get caught up in adding layers and layers and layers and layers and feel that they need to overcomplicate their strategy. I'm here to tell you, you don't, all right? We're looking to buy strength, sell weakness, and where possible in a good trend, look for a pullback in a trend, use a price action trigger for an entry, okay? That's the main element of trend trading in Stage 2. When I look to break that down into a routine and a trading plan that I can follow, that just basically builds in strategy, tactics, and mechanics, sometime over the weekend or on your Monday morning, check the upcoming news for that week ahead. We have a very busy week ahead of us, okay? So not only do we have a fair bit of high impact data coming out, and probably the main bit of it is this afternoon with you've got CPI data out of the US, and then you've got Kevin Bosch, he's testifying to Congress, okay? We've also had Mr. Bailey speaking today, okay? And I think he's speaking tonight. So if you're struggling with insomnia, you might want to listen to him, hear what he has to say, because he'll have you asleep in about 5 minutes flat. But anyway, a fair bit of US and Canadian data and a bit of UK GDP data on a Thursday morning. Then we've got the start of the sort of Q2 earnings season in the US, and this week we've got a flurry, all right, of earnings reports. Many of them today, okay, before the market opens, in terms of the big US financial institutions, but a whole host of other elements coming on, and then we also have the ongoing geopolitical tensions between the US and Iran. Okay, it seems to have started to kick off again over the last couple of nights. So you've got all of those elements. So looking at CPI data and inflation numbers, all right, you've got earnings and geopolitical tensions all vying for the market's attention this week, okay? So hence why we're getting volatility, hence why, as I say, we are living in interesting times. So, but it is important that you check the upcoming news for that week ahead. Then you're going to look to generate your STAM matrix. So if you're on VTP Stage 2, you have access to the plugin, you have access to my sheets, okay, or you can do it yourself. I still do it by hand, even though I've got a plugin, I've got years of doing it. I still do it by hand, all right, a couple of hours on a Saturday morning. And the reason I do it is the markets are closed, I'm not distracted. I sit down and I find that when I do it by hand and go through the charts myself, that is when I have the best, deepest connection with markets. It's when I have the best understanding of what's happening in markets or if there are shifts occurring. And it is just also best practice for myself. Okay. It gets my head in the game. So, but one way or another, you want to generate your STAM matrix so you can understand where is the strength and where is the weakness within the FX markets. Now, for a lot of people, once they've identified where the strength and weakness is, they're happy to go off and trade their own tactics in their own way, and that's absolutely fine, right? Absolutely fine. But if you want to go down a little bit deeper, you can start to look and get an idea of, well, which currencies in particular are STAM 1, where you've got weekly strength, daily strength, and weekly momentum all in alignment, or STAM 2, the earlier version, daily strength, daily trend, and weekly momentum are in alignment. But the important thing is that from all of that, you create your own watch list for the week ahead. And then really, you're following the best part of your VTP Stage 1 10-step tactical trading plan, all right? You're looking for price action setups, tactics showing up on the monthly, weekly, and daily charts, things like TFM tactic number 1, tactic number 2, the 50 MA bounce, STAM 2 mech, pin bars, inside bars, engulfing candles, 3-bar breakouts, key reversals, momentum reversals, counter trend line breaks, etc. I share lots of tactics with you in stage 2. There's lots of tactics there, okay? You don't have to trade all of them. It's about finding one or two that resonate with you that you can basically shape and meld into your own trading plan that builds in strategy, tactics, and mechanics. And if you have the time and the inclination, can you drop down to the sort of 4-hour chart below 4 a.m. for an earlier entry? Your mechanics. Doesn't matter what you trade, doesn't matter how you trade, doesn't matter why you trade, doesn't matter when you trade. Your mechanics should always be the same every single session of every single day of every single week of every single month of every single quarter of every single year. You manage risk, okay? It's those 5 R's of stage 1. You risk manage every trade using stop loss and position sizing. You understand your reward. Are you going to use a target or are you going to trail? You make sure you record every trade. You make sure you review every trade so you're in a position to repeat the good ones and eliminate the scruffy off-plan trade. Those are the mechanics. And as I said, that shouldn't change whatever you trade or however you choose to operate. So that is actually how you take what you learned in stage 2, start to building it into a routine, into a trading plan that covers strategy, tactics, and mechanics. All right, let's start to dig into what the sheet was showing us this week, okay? And what does it draw my eye to, and what am I looking for, okay? So when I look at this, what interests me still is that basically there's still a lot of sterling momentum, all right, okay, and that also cable has kind of come out of its STAM environment. If you look at all the others, though, they are all in STAM environments. They're all in strongly UK supporting strong STAM environments, okay? It's there. I could be wrong with this, okay? I could well be wrong, but we have had some strength in sterling over the last few weeks, and we'll look at the COT report in a moment to confirm that. Part of that I think is a double bubble, namely the let's say domestic political tension that's been going on hasn't been as difficult or as painful as markets had expected. So that's kind of been a bit of a relief rally, and also just a case of is this the possibility of a pump before a dump? The reason I would say that is because I think all of that is based around who the messiah that is Andy Burnham, when he's given his coronation, who he names as Chancellor. I think if he names a solid Chancellor, sterling maintains that strength. If he names someone like Net Zero Nut Job Miliband, I could see a pretty strong sell-off in sterling and gilts and the FTSE. So is this the pump before the dump? All right, we'll have to wait and see. Okay, that will play out over this week and into the start of next week. Okay, when he basically gets his coronation. So all of that's kind of interesting there, right? But there have been some nice trades. Okay, I'll do I'll complete anatomy of a trader, right, for my long on my STAM 1 Bravo long on pounding at Swiss. But interestingly, what we'll look at is there's quite a few of the weekly candles showing up opportunities. Okay, interestingly, which we'll see is that the Aussie dollar, which has been at kind of the top of the pile, has kind of slid away. All right, it's been held up. You've heard me say this for a while. It's been held up by the fact that there's still some strength in the Aussie weekly charts, but we're going to look at that as part of the live market to get an understanding of where that actually sits and how the sort of the world is shifting. When I looked at the overall sheet, okay, so here we go in. All right, week 29 for the 13th of July. Where was the strength? Where was the weakness? Well, what we saw was, dollar remained strong with sterling in second place. Okay, so I've said enough about sterling. Okay, just on the moment there, we'll look at the live markets of sterling. We always finish stage two call on that, but the dollar had that some strength. Okay, there was talk about maybe it sort of peeling off a little bit, but I think the sort of resumption of kinetic warfare in the Persian Gulf, okay, is kind of sort of bumps the dollar there. Okay, dollar has become quite clearly the safe haven of choice at the moment, right? And then of course, then that has knock-on impacts into the sort of inflation, all right? And does that mean that the we're looking at the kind of the possibility and the opportunity for rate hikes in the US? They come back onto the radar, right? And the CPI numbers and PPI numbers and Varsh's testimony will start to give us a little bit of insight on that. We had Waller speaking last night, okay, and that has just kind of given people a little bit of insight, a little bit of a taste for that, but more of that will come out as we go on for the week. At the other end, where's the weakness? Well, when I did it at the weekend, okay, Canadian dollar was still at the bottom of the pile, and Swiss franc, okay, had completed its kind of rollover and collapse, which is what we've been talking about for the last few months. Certainly, since then, of course, Canadian dollar's strengthened. A lot of that to do with the price of oil shooting up off the back of the resumption there. Okay. What we see is, well, yeah, euro is in the fair to middling, okay. Aussie, it's in the middling, but as we'll show, okay, it's kind of weakened a fair bit. The interesting one is Kiwi dollar. Kiwi dollar's kind of worked its way up to third place. We even saw, actually, you can see is overnight, okay, Kiwi dollar strength has continued. A lot of that is to do with the rate hike that came out of the Royal Bank of New Zealand recently, and also the implication that there's probably going to be at least a couple more of the New Zealand dollar. We'll look at that in a moment when we look at kind of Kiwi dollar against Swiss franc. We'll see how the understanding the STAM and understanding the kind of let's say the kind of the trajectory, the line of travel for those is that can help us, all right, in terms of understanding markets and understanding our trade setups. Okay, so interestingly on that, okay, so there is I foresee that, as I said, sterling. Could this be the pump before the dump? All right, okay, or is it a rally based rally if he appoints someone who's not a nut job as the Chancellor? Certainly, when you look at the commodities, okay, what we saw, and we'll look at this more in a moment, right? Oil was still STAM 1S, okay, gold STAM 1S, silver STAM 1S, Bitcoin STAM 1S, okay, whilst the VIX was bullish, okay. So oil, that's probably going to change, okay, over this week. No surprise there if you've been watching the oil price and how that's particularly flowed its way through. But for stage two, we tend to focus on kind of FX and commodities for this particular call. So lots going on there. If we look at the COP report, in particular, COP report for UK, all right, that's what, sterling is what I trade the most of, all right, looking at where are we, what's this telling us, how can this help us? Well, what we see is that the kind of large speculators have consistently been short. They might have eased up a little bit over the last week or so, whereas the big commercials have been long, all right, and that probably basically gives us an indication of where, we have seen a kind of a little bit of a shift there in sterling. A lot of that, I think, is also down to sort of shenanigans in the dollar. But when we look at the kind of numbers, when I look at the large speculators, okay, they're 44,000 long, okay, 132,000 short, okay. So they are clearly, okay, their biases has been to the short side. Yep, they've added longs and they've trimmed their shorts, but they're still pretty much on the short side, as opposed to the commercials who, whilst they do have 110,000 shorts, okay, they are still long, all right, 208,000 contracts. They may have trimmed an awful lot out of it, okay, but they're still long. What we're seeing is even the kind of non-reportable, okay, the kind of the sort of what they always like to think of as the dumb money, okay, which is also right. They have consistently still been short, all right. Yep, they've trimmed, and we're starting to add longs there, okay. So if the non-commercials, okay, if the speculators are starting to kind of trim their positions, okay, then you have to wonder, are we getting, as I said, maybe next week? I'll be interested to see next week's numbers and the week after, after little Mr. Burnham's coronation to see how the big boys, okay, respond to that. Okay, so you can see what the positioning is at the moment. As I said, I'll be fascinated to see if this shifts completely over the next week or two. All right, and the impact that has on sterling, gilts, and FTSE, etc. So that's what we're looking at there. If I look at the kind of latest STAM plugin, so this is just a screenshot from the plugin that you get on STAM 2, stage 2 rather, to do what's it telling us, where's it giving us the latest, okay, the numbers. Interestingly, okay, dollar remains, okay, top of the pile, but it is, as I said, it's sharing it with Kiwi Dollar. Kiwi Dollar, the 4-hour chart, has shown a lot of strength, okay. It's kind of nicked that place from away from sterling. It's more for the stage 3 intraday people, but it was kind of an interesting intraday session for sterling this morning. Okay, I had a mixture of both longs and shorts. Normally there's a very clear bias one way or the other, but there was a bit of both there. Okay, in terms of how we're operating, maybe that's just an indication of kind of everybody sort of repositioning themselves in front of A, CPI, B, Iran, and others. Okay, but yeah, it was a good session, but it was an interesting session as well. And what we've seen is, listen, Canadian dollars worked its way up there, but that is also, if you look at that, that's all on kind of the 4-hour and the daily charts. Those numbers of strength, and that's because, as I said, the oil prices pumped its way higher this week based upon the resumption of kind of kinetic operations in the Persian Gulf. Which kind of takes a little bit of the wind out of the sails. If you look at the STAM focus for this week, okay, you would have been long dollar CAD, okay, but you've not really had any opportunities to trade that, as well as pound CAD, okay. But as I said, that kind of Canadian dollars had its bump this week based off that, but also long dollar Swiss at long pound Swiss, okay. So my pound Swiss trade has kind of worked its way out, but that was just. That's just been very nice. All right, okay. In terms of going from STAM 2 to STAM 1 on that, that's the way it's worked. If we look at commodities and their futures, this is just a bit of a snapshot. Okay, so if I look at what's going on in the terms of the sort of STAM, we have started to get a little bit more of a mixed picture. Okay, we were very much all bearish a couple of weeks ago, but it's mixing its way out there. Okay, and we've got quite a bit in good STAM environments that are providing some opportunities. There's been some really nice price action in the commodities recently. Okay, I will provide an update on my soybean trade. Okay, I'll provide the anatomy of the trade. Okay, I'll update and put that onto the platform. All right, that people can have a look at. If we look at for the last day, all right, no surprise, okay? No surprise that, listen, look, crude oil Brent, crude oil West Texas, heating oil, okay, gasoline, all right, they were all the bigger movers yesterday. This is the 24-hour candle, 24-hour numbers, okay? So no real surprise on that. That shouldn't be a shock. That's just reflecting it. And then this heat map reflects the last week, okay, just looking at a little bit of a longer term. And interestingly, yep, the agris have done well, but not unsurprisingly, okay, what we've seen is is energy over the last week has had its biggest bump. All right, that's what we've seen. But in fact, also with that, a lot of those precious metals have struggled. All right, they've clearly struggled there. Okay, and that has been the kind of interesting point. Okay, lots of people thinking that war on would mean gold racing higher, but that has not been the case. Okay, there is an element of basically gold being, let's say, suppressed by the strength in the dollar, but also the events of, there are probably some people struggling still, and they are basically selling any profitable positions in order to cover off any margin calls. Okay, and so hence why we have seen gold. I mean, it's trading back up above 4,000 today, but it had clearly dipped its way beneath that over the last few weeks, and I think that, as we'll see on the live markets, that kind of pivoting around $4,000 is where we're at the moment with gold. Yeah, this is our own heat map. Okay, as I said, if we looked at the indexes, okay, indexes were all very bearish. Okay, back in March during the kind of height of the war. Then, of course, as we had that sort of ceasefire announced, everybody got a bit giddy and a bit green. Now, the last couple of weeks, it's kind of filtered its way out of there, hasn't it? Everybody's sort of scratching their head, working out, well, if there are going to be, if we are going to get interest rate hikes, okay, and the AI tech is starting to get a little bit stretched, I think, and we're going into summer. Everybody's getting a little bit, I would say, a little bit nervous. But as I said, we can see oil, gold, silver, all right, have been, and Bitcoin have all been on selling environments for 5-6 weeks now, and a lot of that is to do with the strength of the dollar. And I said in the commodities, a couple of weeks ago, it was pretty much all kind of all bearish, all right, but now it's flipping, all right, it's flipping, we're going bullish. People are starting to get into commodities. Okay, maybe that's a reflection that people thinking not only are we going kinetic in the Persian Gulf, but that's going to be around for a few months now. This is not something that's going to be basically sorted out and eased off in a couple of days. Maybe there's a kind of a longer, deeper war coming. If I look at equities, okay, remember this is all just big picture stuff, looking at my own things, okay. So interestingly, all right, that Netflix are covered yesterday, okay. They've got their numbers out on Thursday. They still have been in a bearish super trend, okay, on that. Apple has been in a bullish super trend for a while. It's pushing its way there to its highs. Meta's done okay generally. If we look at the JP Morgan, okay, they're in bullish super trend, and they have their numbers, okay, coming out about now. They might have even been released by now. And then if I look at this for the week, okay, what's it telling me? All right, for the last week, the picture is interesting. No surprise. They look at all the energy. The energy's strong. Healthcare, which has been doing really well, has kind of come off. All right. And there has been some joy in tech, not if you're holding shares of Oracle, mind you, but there has been over the last week a little bit of joy in that. We will see. Okay, we've got ASML tomorrow. Okay, they're probably and TSM on Thursday. So they're probably some of the biggest names in terms of the kind of AI tech semiconductors. Theme, that narrative that we see, okay, and I think they might give us an indication of the kind of direction of travel for them over the next couple of days. Yeah, ETFs. All right, I just look at this as just the weeks. I look at this just to really tell me, is there something I've missed? Is there something that I'm kind of not aware of? Is the picture is the picture sort of all the same? Remember, this is just all big picture. Listen, no surprise. Commodities down. They're okay. Energy up. Okay, not a massive shocker. Healthcare, like I said, has been down a bit. So other than that, nothing really else. That I'm getting totally shocked about. Okay, as you can see, the kind of SMH, the global technology semiconductors ETF, the one that everybody loves, is still sort of just plugging away there. And before we switch to live markets, okay, last look at the global. All right, this is the global over the week, over the heat map. Is there anything there? Is there any kind of theme that's leaps off the pot chart at me? Okay, is there something I need to be aware of, or is it just confirming the overall story? When I look at that, there's not really much there of that kind of leaps off the chart at me saying, oh yeah, I need to get some, I need to follow up on that. Listen, Brazil has done all right, is doing all right. That's AstraZeneca, isn't it? If I'm honest, I don't understand why that's down over 13% in the last week. I'll take a look at that after this. All right, I don't consider myself an equity specialist, but when I see big numbers, I'm always curious and interested to see what the story is. All right, so there we go. All right, there's the sort of, let's say, the slide element. Let us switch across to the live markets now, and let's see what's going on there. So just bear with me for a moment, and I'll just switch across. So just bear with me for a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so here we are, STAM plug in there. Let's get rid of that. So what is this? What is it showing me? This is my dollar profile. Okay, as always, Aussie on the daily, Euro on the daily, cable on the daily, dollar Swiss on the daily, Kiwi dollar, dollar CAD, dollar yen, and the dollar index. Okay, and I always have these set up like this. I always start the dollar. I want to look at the dollar index. The dollar's the big daddy. I want to see what is it doing. Okay, is there any very clear trend in place? Do I and can I use that information to help me going forward? So as always, I look to start with the dollar index. Okay, it's the same routine that we go through. Bang, weekly chart had been in that range, blew out of that range, and it looked like we are perhaps coming back into it, a little bit of a flag, coming back to the to that kind of big 100, 101 level, 150 area. If I go down to the daily chart, okay, this is where I started to get interested, and we talked about this a fair bit. 20 period moving average, okay, has acted as really good dynamic support, okay, for the last 6 weeks or so, wasn't it? Acted as really nice there, and we are back here. I was looking at this as a bit of a bull flag, and yes, we kind of worked our way out of it. Today is a little bit of a lower, but not a real surprise there. As I said, I'll be interested to see what those CPI numbers are, and also what Vash has got to say during his testimony. So don't be surprised if it's a bit of a volatile session, but I still see that as dollar bullish. Okay, at the moment, that's my kind of view on it. All right, which is we've had that little bit of a pullback, and I'm still seeing as being a little bit bullish there dollar wise. So then you're looking at, well, actually, how's that played out against everybody else? Well, what we can see is that actually, Kiwi dollar, all right, has strengthened its way there. Okay, no surprise, as I said, Kiwi has been strengthening a fair bit. Dollar against yen, that is just literally pivoting around that 162 level, all right? Everybody's been waiting for the Ministry of Finance and Bank of Japan, all right, to basically intervene again, but it's not happening. And I see that price is just coiling up and just kind of basically pivoting around 162. That's where I see that on that. But we've seen dollar against Swiss franc strengthen, which we're going to look at in a moment. Sterling had strengthened, okay, which we'll look at. All right, euro. Well, Euro had tried, but it's kind of. I was looking at us basically coiling up here, okay. But basically, as you can see for yourself, let me get rid of all these drawings, okay. Is that actually what we're starting to see? Is that it's starting to drift its way down there again, isn't it? That's the way I would look at that, okay. And that would still sort of be an element of that Euro weakness, a little bit of sterling strength. If we look at dollar CAD, all right. Dollar CAD had really peaked its way out very nicely, kind of real triple top there. And what we've seen is it kind of drift its way down. And that is that reflection of that Canadian dollar strength off the back of the oil price pumping its way higher, and the effect that that has had on Canadian dollar. Okay. So that has been quite, as I said, it was going into the week, the STAM focus was to be long dollar CAD. That's fine, but as you build a picture about, well, actually, this is what's going on at the moment, and also the fact that none of the price action is in any way supportive of that. That is why you're just waiting for the alignment of strength, trend, and momentum, okay, and price action to give you an opportunity. When it doesn't, well, you just sit on your hands, okay. So there we see with the dollar. Let's take a look at Aussie dollar. And the reason is because, as I said, Aussie's held up a little bit on the weekly chart. Okay, the weekly has been holding it up on the stand, but I've been talking about this for months that actually, Aussie has been weakening. So I've got Aussie on the weekly, pound Aussie, Aussie CAD, Aussie Swiss franc, Aussie yen, Euro Aussie, Aussie Kiwi, and the ASX. The ASX, just not terribly exciting or interesting there at the moment for me. But if we look at that, there's basically Aussie, okay, weakening against the US dollar there, okay. Even sterling, okay, strengthening against the Aussie. The dollar there. Aussie against Canadian, all right, is interesting because Canadian's been at the bottom, but if you look at that, I see that as a triple top with the third leg being a bearish engulfing, and now we're kind of the 20 starting to roll, we're starting to sit there on that, okay. Aussie Swiss, okay, Aussie Swiss, this is kind of like, even though the Swiss has been weakening faster, we can see that basically Aussie is kind of working its way a little bit low. I know the last 2 weeks is a little bit bump, but they're kind of, I don't see that as a bull flag, right? I see that as it kind of working its way a little bit down. Aussie against the Kiwi, okay. Aussie against Kiwi had strengthened. We're going to look at Kiwi, I think, as well in a moment. But then we had this real big bearish engulfing candle a couple of months back, okay. It was say bearish engulfing. It's a rejection candle. It's a domino candle. It's a key reversal candle. And kind of double topped, and then as you can see, we're kind of that Aussie weakness, okay, has been coming in there. Even Euro has managed to strengthen a little bit against the Aussie, okay. And interesting as well, yen is at its weakest in 40 years against against the dollar, and it has been a fantastic trend. That is the Aussie yen trend, okay, for most of the last year, and it's been fantastic, okay, and I've enjoyed that very much. But I thought we were starting to peel off here just in front of the wall, and then the wall basically pumped us up. But then, it's kind of a little bit of, we kind of flushed these highs, but if you look at it, we really struggled to hold up, and then basically we printed bearish engulfing, bearish key reversal, bearish domino. All right, you can label it as you want, and we're starting to work our way lower, aren't we? the daily chart, you can see it is kind of working our way lower there. That's what we're seeing, and it's just reflecting that the Aussie week hasn't the what Aussie weekly charts haven't changed on the STAM much because the STAM is not there to identify turning points. But when you're doing this every week, all right, when you're going through the charts every week, okay, you start to build a picture of what's going on, all right, and actually what you can see. So that's what we see there with Aussie dollar. Let's have a look at the opposite. So because whilst we're going to have a look at Kiwi dollar. Yeah, we'll have a look at Kiwi dollar, and then sterling. If we look at Kiwi dollar, as I said, we've seen some strength going on there, okay, recently. So this is Kiwi dollar, Euro Kiwi, Pound Kiwi, Kiwi Swiss, Kiwi Yen, Aussie Kiwi, Kiwi CAD, gold. All right, okay. So bang, as we said, Kiwi against dollar has strengthened considerably. Euro has weakened against the Kiwi dollar. Aussie, as we just looked on the daily, has weakened against it. Pound against New Zealand dollar, okay, has weakened. Kiwi dollar has strengthened against the Canadian. It's interesting, even with Canadian having a good week, it's still Kiwi managed to work its way, and Kiwi against yen has done really well on the daily chart there. And one of the interesting ones is also looking at Kiwi Swiss franc. So Kiwi Swiss franc over the weekly, over the last few years, you can see has just been, pretty much one-way traffic. That's been a great trend, all right? That has been kind of Kiwi weakness, Swiss franc strength. But as I said, if we look at that this year, it's almost like it's basing, isn't it? It's not been exactly a textbook turnaround, but then what you want and what you get are two very different things. But the last couple of weeks, we've started to get back up over the 50, okay? And this is what I've been talking about is when you see Swiss franc has been falling down the STAM and Kiwi dollar has been working its way up the STAM. And then that's why we start to see it in those charts there. Okay. And that's why, we're starting to see it's Kiwi strength, Swiss franc weakness. And that's where we start to work our way up. And that's what we've been looking at, working at 4-hour charts even nicer. The frustrating thing for me is I was hoping to actually even get in on earlier on kind of lower time frames, but if you look at this, most of the moves here on Kiwi Swiss, all right, most of those moves have happened at the kind of start of the Asian session there. You can see how most of them have basically sort of just happened then. That's what's been going on there. Okay, so as I said, I like to see a kind of a nice pullback to get in, and what I want to be able to see is pullback beneath the lows and then launch itself higher. But sometimes the trend is so strong, it just doesn't give you the pullback you want. I mean, it has pulled back, but I am firmly in my pit asleep by that, by the time this is moving. But this is what stage two is all about. Strength v weakness. Okay. Utilizing the trend, utilizing the momentum. Okay. It doesn't happen as often as we like. So where you hear me say it, when I see it like that, well, then you don't fight it. You want to work with it. Okay, and as always, let's finish off with sterling. Okay, so this is my sterling profile. I've got pound against dollar, pound against yen, euro sterling, pound Swissy, pound Aussie, pound Kiwi, pound CAD, and the FTSE. Okay, so let's just focus on the sterling because I appreciate we've overrun a little bit. I do apologise, but as always, there's lots for me to share with you. So let's look at pound against dollar. We had been in that trend, okay, that downtrend of, sterling weakness, but mostly dollar strength. But you can see for yourself that has kind of changed as we talked about, as those commercials are long, the non-commercials are short, all right? And what happened is we ran our way nicely up into these moving averages here, the 50, the 200, all right? We worked our way up there and pin barred, and then yesterday we kind of fell down. We've had a little bit of a respite on that, but I'll be interested to see how that plays through. As I said, Burnham's getting, his coronation, all right, okay, and at some point he's going to have to start answering questions, all right, and I think what will happen is we'll be found out that he's even weaker in the head than Starmer, but that could just be me, all right, we'll see. But what we have seen, as I said, is this the kind of the pump before the dump? All right, is this the pump? He gets his coronation, and then invariably, on his first day, he announces Miliband as his Chancellor, and basically Sterling just gets dumped massively. Okay, that is one scenario that I might sort of say, watch out for and look for. Okay, nobody's really interested in Burnham. Everybody's sort of they're already bored of him. Nobody really, knows, and nobody's really interested in him. everybody's looking at, well, who's going to be Chancellor? That's the question that's going to be. Okay, but yeah, we can see the way that that's played out. All right, so on the 4 hour chart, we kind of gapped down a little bit, pulled up and dropped away down. And as I said, this morning was kind of interesting. All right, intraday. All right, so we kind of we hit our lows. All right, and then worked our way up, bit of PO20, worked our way up there. Okay, there was a bit of Pac-Man going on there for me, but that kind of intermediate trend is kind of a little bit of a pullback on yesterday. As I said, remember we're running into CPI in about 25 minutes. That will undoubtedly have a say on it all in a moment. Pound against yen. Yeah, pound against yen, you can see we talked about this kind of wedge triangle building. We broke out of it. We came back, retested it. Okay, if you like trading triangles, and we've worked our way up. As I said yesterday, this was it's a bit of an evening star on the daily chart there, all right? But we'll see. As I said, maybe we still get a little bit of sterling work and right higher. Okay, so we'll see what the GDP numbers are like on Thursday, and we'll also, as I said, everybody's waiting to see who's going to be the Chancellor. That's the kind of overlying thing on that. Pound against Swiss. Yeah, pound against Swiss has been, the good trade. Remember what we just looked at in terms of Kiwi dollar against Swiss franc. Swiss franc has been weakening its way. The S&P said at the start of the war they were going to use it as an opportunity to weaken, and they have done that. Okay, and that's why we've seen this kind of work its way nicely up. All right, and it's just continued to move higher, and that is some sterling strength, but a lot of Swiss weakness as well. Pound against Kiwi, well, we just looked at that, didn't we? And you can see that Kiwi dollar strengthening there. You can see it's working its way up there. Pound against Aussie on that daily chart. Yep, we had seen some sterling strength, but I wonder if we're double topping out here. Okay, around about 93. Is that a double top? Let's just see how this moving average holds. Let's see how these VBs hold. That's what I'll be looking to see. That's there's the high. Okay, that's the VB, and so I'll be looking to see kind of a 190, 150. All right, is that a change in the structure there? Pound against Canadian dollar. That had been a nice trend because pound CAD is not always the nicest thing, easiest thing to trade on the swing. But last month it kind of worked its way. But now I look at that, that's a bit of a double top, triple top, you might say, depending on how you look at it. I would look at that as a DTB 1, 2, 3 double top. It's broken the 0.2, and now we're looking to see, well, actually, can it follow through? Can it work its way from that? All right, is that what we're going to be looking at? Okay, so yeah, bit of Canadian data, bit of UK data. It might be messy until then. All right, so just watch and shoot if it comes up and then looks like it's going to leg down. Finally, euro against sterling. You've heard me banging on about this descending triangle for months. Okay, all right, talking about how that kind of 86.20, 86.30 area is acting as support. But boom, once we finally broke it, we've really worked our way down there. Okay, and that daily chart I was talking about it. That level of support was holding, but the highs were getting lower. You're getting lower highs, support, break. And once we've broke, we've just worked our way down there nicely. And now I look at that, well, yesterday we did close higher, all right, euro against sterling, but that's the VB. That's what I look at. That's the VB. And until that, I'm bearish until I see, a difference in that. Okay. And that, as I said, there's an element of that euro weakness. I talked a little bit about it yesterday in terms of looking at the CACs. I think basically it's Bastille Day today, isn't it? Or they've got the Bastille Day parade in Paris, but invariably it's going to be Macron's last one, and naturally everybody's interested to see, is it going to be Le Pen who's going to be the president in at the next elections? All right, and I wonder if that's what's being replicated there or represented there. Okay, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Let us draw it to a close there. Okay, as you know, I'm kind of flying through this as fast as I can be. Okay, but as always, I'm trying to just share with you as much as I possibly can in the time we've got available. If you've not seen this before, I hope you find it useful. I hope it gives you a little bit of help and insight into what we cover on stage 2 and how we are to build that picture to give us an indication of where's the strength and where's the weakness within FX indices and commodities markets and how we utilize that, okay, for our own trading endeavors. As always, it is going to be an interesting week, so make sure you're on top of your risk management, make sure you're on top of the news flow, make sure you're on top of the order flow. Have a fabulous trading week. I wish you every success with your trading endeavors, and I'll speak to you soon, everybody. Take care. Cheers. Yeah, thanks, Peter. See you in a couple of weeks.